Hi, Ivo, can you hear me? So, Ivo, I'm trying to start translating for you. I'll just get started here. Pedro is introducing the SEDECA NGO, right? And also talking about a bit about the ways they are performing like partnerships around the country and how this is consequential for the way they are seeing the event right now. So the NGOs that are helping them along and creating partnerships. Um, so now he's acknowledging some of the folks that helped him in the performance of the NGO in the last years. They're acknowledging the translation right now. Um, um, so now he's talking about another NGO. I didn't catch the name of the NGO because my connection kind of had a hiccup, but just I think it's a partner NGO that um, is doing work on cooperation in I mean, he's just talking about the ways that they're learning with this NGO and so on. Like, I think it's Miserio. Okay, so yeah, it is Miserio. It's Miserio. It's a support for people in wealth vulnerability situation, and it's really working on that. Uh, okay, so let me try to do something. Now, I think that now you can hear only me. Is that better for you? I try to. No, this is better for me. I changed now. So he's talking about the Misidio, which is this NGO that is coordinated by Madelena, that works with poor people around the world, and that has been a first hour partner for them. So um, it's been doing some important work in that regard. This partnership has been really important for the way in which SEDECA has been working, and it's been working in other countries like Morocco, and also been instrumental in the work and in developing work from SEDECA with different partners. He's also thanking everyone that's been working with SEDECA in the last years, and acknowledging then Fernanda Russi, who is a design student who's been working with us and actually is the person who is in charge of this translation. He's also and she's also been really instrumental in creating a better environment. The entire conversation is going to be recorded, and it's going to be available for people inside that have subscribed to the channel and so on. He's thanking everybody that's involved in the seminar that's going to talk tomorrow, and Danielle, who is instrumental to contacting yourself, right? And that both you and Professor Ashuti are the specialists in this discussion, so you've been really instrumental in the dissemination and information about restorative justice. He's also talking about Célia Passos, who's been really a surprise because and she's going to share the conversation with Professor Saulo, who works in the United States and Canada, and who's been really important. They're also going to have peace. It's how do you call it? It's a peace circle, right? I think so. That is going to be a sort of they're going to perform the circle, and so they are also focusing on domestic violence in-house domestic violence, and the way that in-house domestic violence impacts lives. And Maria America Diniz has been doing some work on that, and now she's going to talk about this this work that her NGO is doing. Her audio is really low, so she is talking about the way that she's been managing the SEDECA and how this action has been really important, that without false modesty, they are really being successful, that they are discussing public policy and proposing a change in the ways that the municipal hall has been working with restorative justice. So we are now walking with the city hall and working with the city hall in order to do work with students and so on. And that she really believes that they can do something to help the country and help the city, and to stress the exclusionary character of the social framework of Brazil, and the need to provide access to democracy and justice in a context wherein these issues are not really implemented. And we've been really recognized institution within our system here for protection to teenagers and children. And we've been working to implement and warrant the Teenager and Children Protection Act. Since my opening time, my speaking time is really small, and I tend to talk a lot. I really like to talk. So I am really an activist, and I'm very active I've been an activist within UNICEF. I've been an activist in Brazil, Africa NGOs, and what I really want to say is it is fundamental in the current Brazilian context, which is a context of really intense violation of human rights, but especially of children and teenagers, because this is where we act the most, that we can have a mobilization and an articulation of different support systems. In Brazil, we've been acting in a very unarticulated form. Everyone says that intersectionality is fundamental, and that is true, but every institution has been working in its own sphere, and this is really a characteristic of Brazilian society. Within you have a fragmentation of each NGOs and movements, activist movements in every single sector, right, including feminists, the transgender rights, racial rights. And our moment right now is a moment of real war. So we really have unprecedented situation in Brazil. It really is not even in the dictatorship. And I was a political prisoner during the dictatorship, and not even during that time, I saw such repression of social movements and such lack of support and criminalization of social movements. So we're really not going to give up, but we need to resist. Not only not give up, we need to resist and mobilize and show this government, this authoritarian and anti-democratic populist government, that we are going to continue resisting, and that we're not going to accept that our children and teenagers will be targets of vulnerabilities connected to lack of budget and so on for social programs. And this has been going on not only today, but it's been going on for a time. And the situation is really been going on for a while, but it's been intensified in the last years. I am not a specialist in restorative justice. Our project is an extremely important project, but my area is really sexual violence, and I've been working for 25 years in this area, and connected to all sorts of violences, psychological, physical violence, and sexual violence connected to. And I'm really comfortable talking about this area. And as a president of CEDECA, I'm really honored. I've been president since 2000. I've been in CEDECA since 2009, and this NGO was created by Vanderlei Ferreira Neto, a great Brazilian, and I really think that I followed his suit in carrying the torch of the mission of SEDECA in Brazil, in Rio de Janeiro, as an institution, in connecting and supporting this institution as an institution that supports its staff. So during the COVID crisis, we've been giving support for our staff. They can do work at home, and I think that's also acknowledges the way in which we really support. We put our mouth where our money is, our money where our mouth is. And really, right now, what we need in Brazil is a new democratic wave, like what we saw in the 80s, and organization of our institutions, so we can really continue working for implementing the kind of policy that Brazil needs in the most moment. I'm sorry, I probably talked too much, and I've been retired for a long time, but I do this because this is my vocation. And now, really, I want to thank you all. And I really hope this seminar will be really productive for all of us. And now there's a lot of noise in the background for me, so I can't really hear her. So I apologize. I couldn't catch the rest words. So I want to thank everyone in the opening panel. As Pedro has said, he has introduced about I wanted to begin saying that it is a privilege to have SEDECA as a partner, which is a partner that has excelled in many different levels. and the work that's been done in the social juridical area. So this is really what we're doing, or what we are seeing right now is the destruction of the structure of social help within the government. We also need support, national and international support. And it's really important that now, then I'm really happy that this current action of CEDECA really is connecting to international organizations. And it's important to stress this in this moment. And I want to talk now as an educator. I'm not a jurist. And I'm talking about, so he's talking about the context in Belgium, where Belgium described aggressive behavior in teenagers as a mental health issue, and that was a really, you don't hear me, that's weird, just a minute. So I'm just trying to figure out here, we're having sound problems, and I'll try to see with the folks in the administration if we can work this out. I apologize if you're not hearing. So I'm just trying to confirm if this is a problem in other ends. So I'm being told that most of the folks that are following are able to. So I think we solved the situation. So what Jan is talking about is the situation in Belgium, with the ways that the teenagers were the teenagers that were connected to some activities of vandalism and so on were actually helped by people connected in pedagogy and education, and they had the opportunity to work within some problems. And this issue was connected to problems of they stole sweets from a bakery, and what happened is that in order for them to understand the whole situation, they were given the opportunity to work in a bakery and produce some of the things that they stole or vandalized. And this wasn't interesting, because when they were able to see how this was done, they kind of repaired the situation on the one hand, and on the other hand, they were able also to understand the value of the product. And now now he's talking about the situation where a teenager tried to steal a bicycle, and when he actually got the bicycle, a policeman approached him with the gun in his hand, and the owner of the bicycle herself and saw the situation. Hey, can't do that, right? And what happened is that that was a moment, an interesting moment, because they were able to start a conversation between the victim and the perpetrator. And this situation actually was an interesting situation for both of them to have a pedagogical moment wherein they could learn a bit about each one's positions and what mean a vulnerable teenager that is in a situation wherein you're committing crimes, right? This is an interesting situation for us to approach some methodologies in restorative justice. And that we need to understand that we can understand two things at the same time, that you have the trauma of being the victim of assault, for example, or a violent crime, or just really being robbed. But this is a situation that can create trauma, but you also need to understand what are the circumstances of the perpetrators, especially when we're dealing with young perpetrators. So now he's talking about the situation in Brazil. And what we have in Brazil is that we have two problems. One, the large numbers of crimes that are committed by young people. And on the other hand, this impulse towards really punitive and violent reactions against young criminality. And my message actually is a message of hope that our NGO has been doing really a large work with young people that work with drugs, that work for drug dealers, and some others that even had drug problems since they were very young. And we've been able to give them some structure to have a shot at a second chance in life. Of course, we might need repression in crimes that are a little bit more harmful. But even when we're talking about more harmful crimes, we can study some alternatives. And even when you have folks that are caught and are and have very long prison sentences, we also need to provide these individuals with some alternatives to recompose their lives or even to conduct their lives in prison. But when we're dealing with youngsters and teenagers and children, we really need a public policy that is able to drive the situation, and CEDECA has been one of the pilots for this plane. And this is the scenario where we're in right now is very dramatic, because as Maria America told us, you see that our current president has been kind of supporting or maybe praising militias. And we know what these militias do to young, vulnerable people in Brazil. So it's really a bad message when we have the president supporting militias that kill, murder, kidnap youngsters, and so in this context, we really need to investigate how people in the public sector can learn a bit from our own experiences in SEDECA that can help us humanize these individuals that have been dehumanized by the public sector. So now he's wants to give you a message, a short message in English. Então, I don't think I need to translate this, but I will try to translate it in Portuguese. Então, para quem está ouvindo em português agora, né, agradecendo todos os que estão ouvindo em inglês aqui, o professor Ivo, e o que ele gostaria de dizer, que acabou de falar em português, é que a justiça restaurativa, ela é bastante pedagógica e é uma forma nova de dar uma segunda chance na vida de jovens e de transgressores, e em muitos países, em muitas situações, eles não têm essa situação. Então, esse modelo acaba sendo muito importante. E muitos outros países então nós estamos salvando vidas e conseguindo estabelecer uma situação onde nós vemos como de mostrar para essas pessoas que cometem crimes como as suas transgressões causam dano, e considerar esse dano e considerar também como esse dano ele acaba sendo problemático nos dois lados. Então, no contexto brasileiro, nós também temos uma dificuldade grande na medida que juízes têm uma situação um pouco antagônica com relação a essas práticas, mas a gente tem tentado trabalhar também com os juízes para educá-los sobre práticas restaurativas. Então, muito obrigado. So, thank you very much, Jan. And now, Professor Ana Maria Di Basi, who is a public promoter and coordinates the Center for Mediation in Restorative Methods, which is called SEMINAR, in the Public Attorney's Office in the Rio de Janeiro state. So thank you, Ana, for accepting our invitation. So thank you all members of this committee. I really thank you for the opportunity and the great opportunity and the great partnership that we have with SEDECA. I would like to also acknowledge the public that is with us now. And in fact, it is with an open heart that we can really reach a restorative result in society. SEMINARIO in Rio de Janeiro didn't start with this name. It started in 2012, working in all areas for self-composition, auto-composition, and restorative justice. And we really learn a lot from Célia Bastos. We learn from her kindness and openness. And it is on her behalf that we pave this road to restorative justice. My gaze is in a different direction. I think that all the governments that have worked with us have failed, no matter which ideological side, the left, center, and right have failed us, because it is not enough to create a support system. We need to really work in the causes of inequality or the causes of violence. So if I have children and teenagers that are connected to violence, we need to look at the families of these teenagers, these children. We need to bring these families to a more equitable situation, and we need to give them capabilities that in which they can have a good job, a good condition in which they could work with their children and that they could exercise their citizenship. I need to create capabilities for these teenagers that enter the system so they can also are not only a mere deposit. I mean, the system is not only a mere deposit of children that are being punished for their acts. What we want is that the children are able to really do something with themselves, that they are able to be fully citizens that collaborate and build the society, and that look and that don't see themselves only as victims of a system and as victimizers, right, or perpetrators of crimes, but also as part of a society which is truly democratic. Our constitution in 1988 was a democratic constitution, and it was a constitution that was really connected to adversities in the system. We really need to perform a self-criticism and see in which ways the constitution is not enough and in which ways social programs are not enough, ways in which social programs have not been optimum. And this requires maturity from the society and each of the citizens, and requires a maturity of our public agents insofar they are connected to the system. It is in this sense that I've been trying to conduct the SEMINAR. I don't want to victimize truly the system, but I also want to understand how there is two vulnerabilities here, one from the side of the perpetrators and the other from the side of the victims. So it is necessary to have an open gaze, an open way of looking at the situation and looking at every single part that is affected by the situation. So we can see a way in which society can really build up this society democratically. And we can see the violence in each point. And what are we seeing? This is a behavior that is reproduced throughout life and ends up in vulnerabilities. And I also work with children. So children are victims of distructured homes, and the way in which we look at a restorative methodology and a restorative activism is really important in this sense, since we are able to see the family as a whole. And it's really necessary for us to have this open, holistic approach. And the panorama in the pandemic really has shown us that. So we really are seeing a unique situation here, because a lot of the population is not really accessible in this moment, and most of the individuals that we work with, in fact, do not have access to internet. They are not capable of using data packages. They do not have virtual means to be supported online. So we really have a really drastic panorama in the pandemic. And we really now, as soon as the situation is more under control in the pandemic, we need to come back to presential support for individuals, because we really need to be present for these individuals. And I think it's important for us to never give up. We really need to persevere. I've been in the public attorney's office for 30 years, and I learned a lot, but I don't think I've aged. I really think that I've actually acquired a new way of looking at the situation, and to see this really important intersectionality between the public attorney's office And really, I think, forgive me if I'm romantic, but I really believe that we are looking at a better world and having ways of building up a better world for our material and affective needs. And this is a much better world, especially once we see what individuals that have this kind of support really are able to to be helped by these restorative practices, the way that they change. So this really fills me with hope, because it gives the persons that practice harmful acts an opportunity to build themselves up from the ground, and also see themselves as first as individuals in the society, and that have some good and important memories within their own societies. And that's why I really want to thank you all for being with us, and the opportunity for sharing this moment with you. And I really think that together we can build up a better society. So thank you, and thank you for all your kindness. So thank you for all your support. Daniel and Ivo are, I hope, listening to this translation. And now, finally, we're gonna listen to Madalena, who is talking directly from Germany. And I really thank her for accepting our invitation. So, good morning. I'm talking on behalf of the Catholic Church chapter for development. It's a pleasure to be here in the Seminar for Restorative Justice. So it's been 5 years that we've been working together, and this is particularly important because we started our collaboration in Brazil with the environmental disaster in Brumadinho, and the situation has not stopped. We still see that situation as a humanitarian crisis, and we've been trying to see ways of helping that population that's been reached. So our NGO has been working for more than 60 years, and we've been really working and supporting different NGOs around the world. We have 160 partner institutions in Brazil. Our focus is mostly the Northeast because the poverty levels in Northeast, but we also have been working in the southern part of the country. And we've been stressing work on democracy and so on, indigenous populations, children, and we're looking at the ways in which vulnerabilities, structural vulnerabilities, actually increase the effects of poverty. So we are also trying to perform work for self-realization and other ways in which we can help those individuals have a better sense of self. And we really see that those individuals are begging for help. They really need to be helped. And we really want to give those individuals, especially children and teenagers, some sort of protagonism on the way that choices are made for their welfare. So we do this also by supporting the actions of SEDECA in 5 states, in Ceará, Rio Grande do Norte, Alagoas, and in Rio Grande do Norte is one of our most intense collaborations, and also in Rio de Janeiro and Tocantins. In Rio de Janeiro, our partnership is started in 2016, And we really consider that given the current scenario, it's more important than ever to think of this and to stress this. We really are looking at the flexibilization of the gun carrying legislation in Brazil. And we really are looking at the way the registers of new guns are being done and how these registers are connected to an increase of murders and violence in general and gun violence in general. And we're really worried about this tendency. It's also very worrisome to see the way that the situations has been approached by the executive branch, and the connection of the executive branch to drugs and drug dealing. The son of the president, Flávio Bolsonaro, has been connected to some really bad elements in militias and so on. And we're trying to give a counterpoint to these public tendencies and to build a positive social space to introduce better public policies in the support system for teenagers and children, and presenting alternatives to the support system and to the reach out for these individuals that are in vulnerable positions. So we'll have a number of opportunities in restorative justice that are important here. And it's really, in that sense, really praiseworthy to insist on the ways that CEDECA has been acting so far. So, and particularly in the way we're going to look at the way we look at harmful actions. So I want to really stress the way in which CEDECA has been supporting all of you. And the importance of promoting restorative justice practice throughout the world. So thank you so much for this. We really thank you, and thank you the entire team at Miserior. I really thank you all. So the individuals in the institution. And now we're going to your table, to your committee. So now we have Daniel Asciutti and Vera Souza. Daniel in his very new office. So now Vera will introduce the talk by Daniel, I believe. Thank you all. Thank you for your presence. It's really great to see you here. So I'm Vera Cristina Souza. I'm a lawyer. I specialize on infancy, first infancy. And I am part of the coordination of the CEDECA in Rio. And now I am coordinating with CEDECA the protection, children protection. Just a minute. Cacete. What happened? The
só
channel
momento.
We had a problem with the channel.
Oi, Vera, só um momento. A gente teve...
What the
Oi, Fabrício. O Pedro, sem querer, fechou a nossa live. Eu vou ter
que maravilha!
Fazer um novo link para as pessoas. Só um momento.
Que delícia!
Tá. Ok. Oi, professor Ivo, tudo bem? A gente continua ao vivo aqui na tradução, então...
Oh, wait a minute. We're still live in the translation. Is that it?
Só um momento.
Translation is hot.
Estamos voltando.
Okay. So Ivo, just so you know, if you are watching us, the connection has gone sour. Okay. The So we'll be back shortly. There was a problem.
Aqui, eu vou mandar
um link
no chat para vocês, tá? E a gente vai entrar por lá, tá? Sim, eu não consigo reabrir essa. Você consegue ver o link no chat? Ok. Vamos para lá. Tá.
Preciso do link. I need the link.
Estamos ao vivo. Nesse link que eu te mandei no chat.
Okay. So we're getting back. I'm sorry about the
Pronto, voltamos.
Ok, voltamos. Deixa eu só...
Você já está visualizando o link? Pronto.
Sim. So Ivo, I hope we're back together. And Vera is now just talking about the numbers in Rio de Janeiro and how bad the situation has been in Rio lately. And this is a very worrisome factor. And it's one of the biggest challenges in Brazil. And it's been a very big challenge for Brazil, the way that we're going to deal with these teenagers and children and the violence against teenagers and children. And one of the tools that we have to work with this violence is restorative justice. So I really want to invite for the opening of our panel, which is called Searching for the Lost Conflicts, potentialities for restorative justice in Brazil, our dear Professor Daniel Asciutti, who is a lawyer, a criminalist, doctor in criminal justice from the Catholic University in Brazil, who studied in Veneza University and Louvain, and who has written the book Restorative Justice and Penal Abolitionism, which was awarded the Jabuti Prize in law books, and who is ad hoc consultant for restorative justice in the bar, the São Paulo Bar Association. So thank you very much, and Daniel, and you have the floor. So good morning, Vera. I want to thank the invitation that was done by CEDECA. And I want to praise CEDECA by praise Pedro, who's been a partner for some years. We've been really having a very good contact. I've been very happy to be in contact with you. I want to thank Vera for the presentation, for the opening of this panel, and for her words. As I said, it is in fact an honor to me to be part in this seminar and in any activity connected to CEDECA. So please, I want to recognize your invitation and also praise you for all the work you've been doing. I want to also thank you all for all you've been doing, and folks in other institutions that are watching us. It's really important to have this dialogue, this international dialogue with CEDECA, which really shows we really have a lot to do and a lot of work ahead of us. Well, I was thinking in the last days in what exactly I could approach in this panel. As I said to Fernanda just a short while ago, I really think that people are more interested in the next person who is going to talk, who is Professor Ivo. In any case, I will try to contextualize this talk from a very critical approach in restorative justice. At the same time, I want to bring some questions, some provocations on restorative justice, and including some of the work and some of the dialogues, some of the debates that we've been doing in our YouTube channel, which is Justiça Restaurativa Crítica, our channel, which he is going to share with us. And if anyone wants to access the channel, you can look at the link in the system. In any case, what we've been doing in the channel is basically working and approaching a critical perspective in the way that, in the sense that we are located geographically in a country, in a Latin American country, which is crossed by structural conditions that really mark our situation. So we can't forget these issues, where we are at when we talk about restorative justice. It's really important to stress that restorative justice, as has been said for Vera and many others here in the opening, it's got a huge potential in bringing forth some of the questions that are extremely important for the Brazilian scenario. In the last, or one of the last, so you can see the link here. One of the last things that I've been talking about and folks in the channel is really about this question that involves, I really don't like to talk about origin, but I will use this term because it's easier. The origin of restorative justice in a contemporary sense, especially the way in which restorative justice is dealt with, in the ways that we are dealt with through by developed countries when we look at our practices. We have been seeing really an important expansion of restorative justice in the judiciary power. Some work has really been pointing at this sort of prevalence of work within the judiciary. Professor Vera Andrade has been doing a lot of work with this, with the National Council, the National Justice Council. And you can reach all this information in the internet. Professor Rafaela Palamola has done her work on that regard in the ways that it's been consolidated. So, in my point of view, the centrality of the judiciary in the restorative justice, it's got positive, and negative aspects. For example, it was really paramount in making it possible for us to talk about this topic in Brazil. So it was really important for us, and the judiciary was instrumental in talking about restorative justice in Brazil. And also we need to remember that the movement in Brazil comes from within the judiciary. It comes from within the justice system in a way of creating an instrument of self-questioning for the judiciary, and that's an important role of restorative justice for the judiciary in Brazil. It gives us a way of self-criticism for the judiciary. On the other hand, decentralization in a single model of application or restorative practices in circles, for example, which, by the way, is a restorative practice that I am not against. I like the practice. I think it's an interesting way to put restorative practices to work. But I really think that we cannot forget other ways of doing restorative justice, because then and again, other practices can be more interesting in different sorts of conflicts. And in many ways, when we look at this, there is a sort of confusion between restorative circle and restorative justice, as if it were impossible to perform or to perform restorative justice in other ways, like victim mediation or that other forms of performing that are really consolidated throughout the world. But this is not really my point. My point today for you is that it's possible to see many times that the discussion surrounding restorative justice in the last years, at least from my point of view, seems to leave aside questions that are really important and that really are connected to our country. It's important to say that I work with restorative justice on the field of criminal justice. So I really, but with adults. So I really don't work with teenagers. But I think restorative justice as a tool of criticism for criminal justice and a way of administration of conflicts which is alternative, which is less violent, less problematic, and that brings less problems for us in general. But all of these informations, and of course I'm open to criticism, and it seems that the way that we are forming people in restorative justice are ignoring really central elements here in many ways. So I see, for example, that we don't talk about how unequal the country is and how restorative justice needs to acknowledge inequality. I also don't see enough preoccupation with educational deficits and the need of strengthening the educational system. I don't see enough discussions about our histories. And I do mean histories in the plural form, because we really need to acknowledge all the histories that are not told. For example, the ways in which we need to problematize the fact that many books, for example, that Brazil was discovered by the Portuguese, right? As if there was nobody in Brazil when the Portuguese arrived in Brazil. So I don't see enough of a problematization of the center issue in Brazil, which is the issue of racism. And I don't see enough people discussing or writing about, well, I've been seeing, thankfully, more and more, but not enough. But we do not see enough discussion about patriarchal society in Brazil and sexism in Brazil. And all of these issues are really instrumental for us because they are issues that structure our country, because we are not so unequal by fiat. There is a reason why we're so unequal. We have the hereditary division of Brazil in the beginning of the country, and all the informations in restorative justice, they come through, and they do not acknowledge all of these discussions when we talk about restorative justice, as if all of these issues did not impact the way that conflict is formed in Brazil. And obviously, maybe I'm not being fair with some of the ways or some of the forms in which people are being formed in Brazil, but I'm really insisting on this point because Brazil is not for beginners, of course, as you know, but because Brazil is complex, these issues need to be approached when we talk about restorative justice. Naturally, in this perspective, and as I said, I work mostly with adults, I wonder about the role that the Constitution has in this scenario. So the Constitution seems to formalize a dream of a plural society. So we really see that the Constitution has a central role, and it's really instrumental in grounding the rule of law in Brazil, and it brings hope for a progress and for the rule of law in Brazil. And it's interesting because we use these words like fighting racism and that we're fighting against discrimination. And these are words that we can get in the Constitution. The Constitution supports these values. But the thing is, how do we implement these values in the rule of law as a matter of fact? So, on the other hand, criminal justice will bring as its core elements the ruling of this entitlements on a negative sense. So when you look at the criminal system, it's predicated on a structured, it's the structure of the criminal system is predicated on two promises, which is the implementation of a system of human rights and a system of resocialization, which means that when the criminal system interferes, it interferes with a scope of reforming and resocializing individuals. And this is, in fact, in constitutional terms at least, a legacy of critical criminology in our Constitution. And really, there is a centrality in our system in the figure of the accused. And this really frames our activity as lawyers. And I'm not really able to talk about the ways in which other actors bring up this problem. I mean, I can talk about only lawyers. But we really have a centrality on the defendant. So the defendant is always the person who is the target of the system, and also of our preoccupation of resocialization and reintegration. And in this scenario of centrality of the defendant and the promises of changes in behavior that is predicated on the application of the sentence, it really becomes how evident the restorative justice becomes opposed to this way of thinking criminality and crime, particularly in the sense that we bring forth the centrality of the victim in the system. So our problem is that we have these unfinished promises of the Constitution that we really don't see in practice the implementation of all the constitutional principles. And this offers for us a context, a cultural context, which is sufficient to think through the project. And it is in this scenario that we will see how the paradigm of restorative justice can help us give elements for persons involved in the causes to reach out and take protagonism and trying to move away from a movement, from a paradigm which is a paradigm of institutionalized revenge. And finally, I really want to bring forth some of the context of the contemporary context within in which criminal populism really has been a central element who's been really easily fit for the population. So penal populism has really been, or criminal populism has really been something that has echoed in the population, because it deals with the retributive expectations of the population. And this brings an association between crime and prison, between crime and punishment. So this is very hard to fight, because we have this binomial between ideal justice and prison. And it's hard to question this publicly. And this is a central point for our understanding the insertion and the extension of restorative justice. It's a scenario in which criminal populism is really aggregating and dominating the scene in Brazil. And how can we then propose a model of justice which does not think criminal justice through necessarily through punishment? And we want to see if this kind of language can be received within a system which is not structured from defender-centric structures. And when I say this, what I am saying that while our mentality as social actors is focused on the figure of the defender as the main actor, there will be a great difficulty to go forth in restorative practices. We really need, to a certain extent, to think or to perform a mental exercise, an intellectual exercise, to think the structure of a system of justice whose focus is not only the defender or the accused, no matter if it is a teenager or an adult, because this model of thinking will get us away from a new paradigm of justice, because we will still be consciously or unconsciously structured in a way of thinking the criminal justice which is still traditional. I'm not saying that we need to ignore or completely ignore the defender, but what I am saying is that restorative justice, while it is fought through as only a means to resocialization and reinsertion of the defender, or bringing up a space for revenge, for moralization, in that sense, if we're within this framework, we're only replicating the normal criminal system. And then I really don't see any way in which we can create a better scenario. So we need to break away from this mentality. As Husman Christie used to say, we need to bring up a new language. We need to move away from a language of the criminal system and think through a system that will move away, and then think of a better way, a better system for criminal justice. And more than that, we need also think through a space in which people can be thought through in their complexities. And this cannot be a problem. Thinking people through cannot be a problem. It's got to be something that we praise within our criminal system, that we see people as complex individuals. And in a scenario in which we are dealing with criminal populism, and especially within a hyper-connected system like where we are at right now because of COVID, if we take that in consideration, how can we deal with the judicial hearings? If even when we had presential hearings, spaces for empathy were already limited. Now, the spaces for empathy are even more reduced, and it's not hard to imagine that this will have an effect on judicial decisions soon. So we really have here an important issue. Like we just saw the situation in São Paulo right now, in which a person that is under arrest in São Paulo asked for release for health issues. And the answer of the judicial system was, well, right now only 2 people that are human are not connected or exposed to the coronavirus, which are the 2 astronauts in the International Space Station. So it's weird that, but we can understand that the system or the structure that authorizes a judge to bring this argument forth, even in a metaphoric sense, to deny a request for conditional release. And this kind of decision really does not surprise us, but at the same time, it's very symbolic. And it really gives force to this feeling of surprise, not surprise, but of disgust against this system, because we see that the judiciary is completely disconnected of the life of people that have expectations of the judiciary. And the biggest question that involves the advance of restorative justice is connected to this difficulty that we have in our distancing from the reality, and also this lack of connection with the fight, or no, sorry, with facing the real life. And I'm really afraid that we're gonna start seeing a replication of these problems, which ignore social structures in the restorative justice practices. So we need to really pay attention to our social surroundings, and we need to structure and implement them with attention to social problems. We cannot implement them from our own pre-comprehension of the criminal system, because if so, our tendency will be to replicate these issues. So I really think it is important to stress and to acknowledge critics of people like Niels Christie, who has a really important work, which is The Image of Man in Modern Criminal Law, in which he says criminal justice is it works with binary codes for world comprehension. People are either bad or good, they're right or wrong, they are guilty or they are not guilty. And this binary system, it crosses over classifications and it crosses over the level of mere simplifications, and it actually affects the perceptions of people in social life. And then in social life, we start operating with these binarities. So we cannot only we need to move away from this because the consideration of people in this binary way in the justice system I'm waiting for Daniel to finish his sentence. So what we're doing is that we are creating a system wherein we think the whole time, the whole framework of the system through these binarities, and this really affects how we affect people as, or judge people as right and wrong. And if we bring forth of the complexities in these people, really, it's almost impossible to judge. It's very difficult to judge someone if we have a broad understanding of the conditions of the person. But I am not saying that these binarities are not important for criminal justice. So if you look at Zaffaroni, he will bring some issues here. We don't want to replicate some of the issues that we had with author criminality. So we cannot only focus on the act. We need also to focus on the person. But my focus is that when the system works in a binary way, we kind of forget broader comprehension about people's context. And when we focus on a system that is not based on punishment, it's really fundamental to focus on a broader look. So I think that restorative justice has a central role here in allowing people are understood in their paradoxes and their complexities, in a way that they will be able to bring forth what is really important for them, and not only what is important for the justice system. And now I'm starting to finish my talk. This is why my title is Searching for the Lost Conflicts, a critical perspective of restorative justice in Brazil. What can we do then to structure a model of restorative justice which is not going to replicate all the problems that we already know and that critical criminology has allowed us to understand, and avoid then replication of these issues? Recently, Saúde Carvalho and myself finished an article in which criticize this question from 4 examples of recent criminal justice reforms. So the Special Courts Act in Brazil, then the enlargement of the Alternative Punishments Act in Brazil, also another act which implements emergency criminal acts. I'm sorry, I found it hard to translate the technical terms there. But in any case, all of these issues, our main focus is that, in fact, how are these acts instrumental in decreasing the number of people that were being arrested, in a preventive way? Also, how are we doing with people that are remaining in prison without proper hearings? So how are these acts really acting to reform these instrumental problems that we have? If we look at their text, their main intention seems to really be avoiding the enlargement of the punitive power. But what we see in practice, that notwithstanding the fact that they have instruments that would allow judges to decrease the use of prison sentences, every single one of these instruments really failed in achieving a reduction in the number of incarcerations. So I want to see that these 4 criminal reforms, what they really bring forth is that it's a paradox. On the one hand, they try to allow criminal courts to focus on more serious crimes. And this is textual in the acts for the special courts, in which less harmful crimes could be dealt with in a different paradigm that was not going to be would not bring as much stress to the courts. But what is created in fact is that crimes that would end in the police station, that were not really be brought forth for the justice system, now they were brought to the justice system. And this brought up a repressed demand for the justice system. But the curious thing here, the interesting thing here, there was no empirical research back in the day. We didn't know if crimes that had or non-harmful crimes had impact. But when they were brought through to the criminal courts because of this act, it created a number of special courts, and these special courts, like, immediately it started to create new causes for these special courts that quickly became actually larger than the regular courts. And as a consequence, there was not a reduction of work for the criminal system. And in fact, there was an increase of demand for the special courts that are not special courts at all. They become regular courts, in fact. And the main purpose of the act, as an act that tried to diffuse or try to decrease the number of demands for the justice system, had actually inverse effect. The same thing happened in the sense of the alternative system of penalties. Sorry, not penalties, of sentences. So what happened in that is that the act had as a main factor trying to focus on decreasing the number of sentences for prison, and trying to actually decrease also time of prison for individuals that were in prison for less harmful crimes. But what happened in fact is that we see that incarceration is increasing after these acts were implemented, and that judges are not prone to give in a reduction of sentences. Maybe without this law, we would have had even a bigger increase, but it wasn't able really to stop the curve of increase for incarcerations in each case. And then we have a problem in Brazil that a lot of people are arrested under special circumstances before they have a final sentence. So they are in prison for emergency reasons or special reasons. And this act was an attempt to decrease the number of people that are in prison because of this. And I remember that when this act was implemented, I remember that there was a really negative reaction, because many people went to the press to say, okay, so this will mean that people will be released from the prisons, or people will not be in jail anymore. And of course, this was not the fact. But a lot of newspapers, a lot of television programs gave aspect to that. what happened? Nothing happened, because this act, because of the reaction in the press, this instrument is hardly ever put to practice. And what we see, in fact, is a replay of the justifications for people to avoid that we bring people to be object of this legislation, even though they should be. But what we see is that when people are charged, they are charged in a way that they will not be fit for this act. So it didn't have the effect that we were hoping for. So finally, again, we have a final act here, which is about the need to a proper process in the police stations and proper hearings for the defenders. And I actually participated in research by the National Institute for the Right of Due Process. And we saw a number of hearings to see if the hearings were in fact following this act. And what we saw was really alarming. In São Paulo, we found that in these hearings, they followed around 3,000 hearings. And what they saw is that only 0.25% of these hearings, only 0.25% of these hearings resulted in a sentence that did not involve some sort of sentencing for the defender. So out of 3,000 hearings, only 0.23 of the individuals get out of the hearing without a sentencing. And we're not discussing whether or not they deserve to be sentenced, but what these examples show is that our culture is a culture that has in incarceration its tendency. We cannot get away from a system of incarceration. Our culture is a culture that believes in incarceration. And these are not old examples. Okay, all of these examples are pretty new. So what we see in fact is that out of all these attempts to control incarceration, what we see in fact is that the opposite effect has been provided. So we have a prison-centric culture, which is really punitive in essence. And what I want to really bring forth and put into question, it is in this prison-centric culture that we want to implement restorative justice. I mean, I wonder if that's gonna fly in this kind of culture. Shouldn't we be thinking how this prison-centric culture is implemented and structured? Shouldn't we be questioning and criticizing that too within our practices? I mean, I wonder if these four examples don't tell us something about the way in which we are doing our work. So see, it's no wonder that I started my talk saying that I'm a really admirer of what SEDECA is doing, because this NGO is really going on the counter culture here in terms of our reflexes towards judicialization. and is actually trying to achieve measures that are not judicial, that are extrajudicial or something of the sort, and that work with people that are within the system of justice, but from outside the system of justice. And I really think that this is an absolutely necessary condition for us to get away from this prison-centric culture. If we are immersed in an environmental system in which the prison-centric culture is dominating all of the levels, which is our chance to have a restored justice that we will in fact impact significantly in this reality. And I wonder, when we look at the literature in restorative justice, which is mostly in English language, it's mostly foreign, I wonder if when we read these materials, are we really going to observe this while we ignore our own Latin American peculiarities? Is it a big mistake to say that restorative justice needs to impact prisons? And because we see people like Howard Stern saying that restorative justice has no connection to prisons. Well, maybe not in his community, but in our context, I don't see any use in talking about restorative justice if we're not talking about prisons. We need to bring forth the structural questions in Brazil if we want restorative justice to have any impact, any social impact. I'm really saying any, because I don't see restorative justice as a broad social resolution, but it's a tiny instrument for a tiny number of conflicts that we can at least try not to create more harm. So we have a small chance in which we can provide free way to deal with their conflicts. So we need to be very careful when we look at foreign literature in a very, because evidently most of our literature is from abroad. And I saw in Pedro's library, I saw some important books that were published in Brazil, and they are important books that we should be reading, but there are few books that are being produced, especially when we look at the literature in English, which, by the way, are excellent. I love Zer's book. I have nothing against the book. Quite the opposite. I really tell people that they need to learn English if they want to do a PhD in restorative justice. You need to understand language, but that's not the problem. That's not the issue. I'm not disagreeing with foreign authors. I really think it's important for us to talk with foreign people. I mean, it's no wonder Ivo is here, right? I mean, really appreciate the dialogue I've been having with people in Belgium, and we acknowledge the capability that our partners abroad have in bringing forth an experience they have in bringing forth issues of restorative justice. But we also need to remember that we are not Canada, we're not the United States, we're not Belgium, we're not Greenland, we are Brazil. And we have our own issues, our own individual problems. We have our own peculiarities. We have mass incarceration. we have racism, we have patriarchalism, we have sexism. So yesterday we had a case with a large repercussion for a case of a hearing with a rape case that was really like terrible, and but that reflects our culture. So we need to acknowledge that in our criminal justice, victims are re-victimized all the time. This last case came forth because it was dealing with people that are with larger or from a richer social scale. But look, we are in a country where a woman suffers sexual violence every 9 minutes. So since I started talking, 4 women were suffered sexual violence. So let's end with this information and think through this information. We need to hear more people. We need to hear Ivo, who is from the northern part of Europe, who will bring his vision about restorative justice, and that at the same time is someone who goes beyond these geographical barriers. And it was because of Ivo and the discussions that I had with Professor Ivo that I was able to develop these ideas that I am presenting here, that when we bring restorative justice to Brazil, we need to talk about Brazil. And this is something that really was developed within a dialogue with Ivo. So I'm really thankful for this opportunity. But again, it is really paramount that we think about Brazil when we think about restorative justice in Brazil. And I want to thank Vera. And now I will really talk about, or better yet, I'll attentively hear Ivo. So thank you, Danielle. I've already noted a number of questions. I will write the questions in our chat. But thank you for introducing Professor Ivo. I think it was really important, your talk that contextualizes our moment regarding restorative justice in Brazil and the differences and the singularities that we need to have regarding the experiences that occur outside Brazil, and acknowledging our own reality here in Brazil. And it was really a fantastic talk. I just wanted to make one observation, that you really don't have an accent of someone that talks in Rio Grande do Sul. Well, yeah. Okay, so I guess we're gonna move to Ivo's talk. Então vou mudar para português. So Ivo, I don't know if you're hearing me, but she's just introducing herself. So she's going to just introduce you in English, in Portuguese now, and bring forth some guidelines to the students. I don't think I need to translate to the introduction of Vera for you. She's just giving general introductions now, Ivo. So she's just providing the link where you were at. So she's just now going to introduce you in Portuguese. I'll just say one thing in Portuguese now for the guys that are hearing us in the live, okay? Então, eu só quero, para todo mundo que está nos acompanhando ao vivo, avisar que vai ter um pequeno delay entre a fala do Ivo no vídeo que vocês estão ouvindo e aqui porque tem um circuito que é feito, tá? Então não estranhem isso. Mas qualquer problema, por favor, avisem dentro do chat que eu consigo ajudar vocês, ou a Fernanda consiga ajudar vocês, ok? Okay, Ivo, I gave my message to them. So, just introducing you. I will take advantage of this time to drink some water. Ok, gente, vamos começar. Qualquer problema, vocês me avisem. Eu estou acompanhando também o chat ao vivo, por favor, tá? Sim, yes, we hear you. Ok, então, muito obrigado, Vera. Obrigado a todos os amigos do Brasil, especialmente o pessoal do CEDECA. Eu estou muito feliz de estar aqui, de ver vocês aqui, embora virtualmente. Seria muito melhor estar com vocês fisicamente. Então, eu gostaria de dividir com vocês. Ok, eu estou com um problema de... Ok, eu gostaria de dividir com vocês algumas reflexões, algumas ideias. Ah, yes, you need to... Então, vamos falar sobre o desafio da responsabilidade no desenvolvimento de uma nova cultura de paz global e cidadania. Esse é a organização do meu paper. Ela tem, primeiro, para estruturar um pouco a minha fala, eu falei algumas palavras sobre justiça restaurativa, porque eu acho que a maior parte de vocês já sabe bastante sobre o tema. Eu também gostaria de depois falar um pouco sobre a questão da cultura da paz e da cidadania, e depois falar um pouquinho sobre responsabilidade quando trabalhamos ou quando focamos crianças e adolescentes. Finalmente, eu também algumas experiências no meu pequeno país, comparado com o Brasil, que é a Bélgica. Então, vamos falar do primeiro ponto. Então, passando para o próximo slide, por favor. Então, sobre a justiça restaurativa, nós podemos olhar para o Manual de Justiça Restaurativa da ONU, que foi colocado esse ano, que teve colaboração de vários amigos do Brasil, e contém uma definição bastante útil sobre justiça restaurativa, e que contém algumas ideias importantes, e que realmente eu acho que é uma boa definição condutora para a gente. Então, a justiça restaurativa é uma abordagem que oferece a ofensores, vítimas e a comunidade um caminho alternativo para a justiça. Ela promove uma participação segura das vítimas na resolução da situação e oferece para as pessoas uma oportunidade de aceitar responsabilidade pelo dano causado por suas ações. Uma oportunidade para tornassem responsáveis diante daqueles para quais elas causaram danos. Ela é baseada no reconhecimento que o comportamento criminoso não apenas viola a lei, mas também causa dano a vítimas e à comunidade. Então, passando para o próximo slide. Próximo slide, por favor. Então, esse é um novo capítulo que foi incluído no Manual das Nações Unidas. Ele não estava no de 2016. Então, ele tenta colocar, tenta problematizar como nós podemos aplicar a justiça restaurativa para crimes sérios. Então, a justiça restaurativa também pode ser apropriada como uma resposta apropriada em casos onde crianças são vítimas de violência. A justiça restaurativa pode oferecer um clima, um ambiente onde crianças vítimas podem, com o suporte da família, amigos ou algum representante legal, podem participar num processo que garante ou que respeita as suas diferentes necessidades e acomodam em termos de suas capacidades de lidar e com o nível de desenvolvimento e evita mais trauma para crianças através da exposição a um local de justiça adversarial que é difícil e hostil. Os sucessos dessas abordagens, desde uma perspectiva de direitos da criança, depende na extensão na qual a criança está participando. Então, o principal objetivo e princípio da justiça restaurativa é que ela é um modelo de fazer justiça, pelo menos do que eu penso, não apenas sobre fazer justiça, mas ele é sobre fazer justiça que é predicado numa conexão imediata para o mundo social e pessoal das pessoas, e que tenta restaurar o dano que resulta do crime de uma forma tão completa quanto possível. E a conexão ao mundo da vida das pessoas é importantíssima, porque são mundos complexos e que está vinculada a como elas percebem as suas experiências de mundo, seus mundos, seus eventos que acontecem dentro desse contexto. Então a gente tenta colocar o problema num contexto social, onde a violência, o ato de violência acontece. E a gente tenta restaurar, então, o dano, né, o tanto quanto possível. E nós procuramos balançar as necessidades de todos os envolvidos, trazendo para o mesmo local a vítima, o ofensor e a comunidade e outros atores envolvidos, dentro de uma resposta mútua, onde as necessidades de justiça de todos os acionistas da ação são levadas em consideração. Essa é uma abordagem bastante geral sobre o que é justiça restaurativa. E é claro que a gente tenta operacionalizar todas as questões na prática, mas existem uma variedade de modelos de justiça restaurativa que são envolvidos aqui. E alguns vocês podem estar familiarizados, como, por exemplo, a mediação vítima-ofensor, conferências de grupo familiar, sentença de pacificação. Mas passando para o próximo slide. Cada uma dessas, então, vai dar ideia a Justice Needs. Então é importante manter a cabeça aberta sobre os diferentes modelos de operacionalização. A gente não deve usar apenas um modelo na nossa atuação, mas sim adaptar os diferentes modelos às diferentes situações que são trazidas dentro do sistema. Então, a gente pode usar esse modelo para tentar trabalhar diferentes momentos da ação ou diferentes tipos de conflito. Nós estamos tentando também estabelecer modelos de justiça híbridos, onde a gente vai fazer uma relação mista, onde existem outros elementos que, inclusive, do sistema de criminal convencional, que são incluídos dentro do sistema de justiça restaurativa. Por exemplo, com relação à reparação do dano. Então, existe um problema importante de interação entre o sistema de justiça normal, criminal, e o sistema restaurativo. E é importante a gente levar isso em consideração. E não é, então, isso não é algo que a gente pode pensar que a justiça restaurativa opera num vácuo. A justiça restaurativa opera numa relação com o sistema de prisão, com o sistema de justiça juvenil e também com os serviços sociais dentro da sociedade. Então, aqui foram algumas palavras sobre justiça restaurativa. Então, no próximo slide, eu queria falar um pouco sobre paz e cidadania. Então, o sistema de justiça criminal e peacemaking, né, a procura da paz, uma cultura da paz, eles são? Então, muita gente vai dizer não, de jeito nenhum. Porque a racionalização dos dois não são compatíveis. Na medida que, por exemplo, nós não temos uma cultura de retribuição dentro da cultura de paz. Então, geralmente, aqui, a principal modo de crítica é justamente no nível da essência do direito criminal, no nível da retribuição. E da essência de legislações de crianças, de adolescentes especificamente, que vai ser predicada numa punição que está vinculada com a censura do crime e da inflição de dor ao ofensor. E também a justiça criminal é um modelo onde o Estado de Direito é aplicado de cima para baixo. E esse é outro motivo porque seria incompatível com modelos restaurativos. E, finalmente, o controle do crime ele é apenas predicado, ele é apenas possível através de instituições do Estado. Então, instituições do Estado, de acordo com esse sistema tradicional, ela está vinculado com uma atuação de agentes de Estado que controlam o crime. Então, essas são boas razões, são bons motivos para falar que a justiça criminal e a justiça e cultura de paz são incompatíveis. Mas existem, é claro, alguns limites interessantes para o sistema de justiça criminal. E esses limites já foram repetidos várias vezes essa manhã, nas conferências que a gente já ouviu. Então, um dos limites também é que a gente, do sistema criminal, é que ele foca no ofensor e não necessariamente na vítima. E outra questão é que a justiça criminal não se ocupa com as emoções e as outras consequências psicológicas das partes. E também não se ocupa com as causas subsistêmicas do crime. e também que ela não está reconstruindo associações sociais e coesão social, incluindo aqui um senso de respeito e obrigações recíprocas entre os cidadãos. Essas críticas são realmente bastante fundamentais no que tangem os limites do nosso sistema criminal. Então, aqui existem alguns argumentos bastante interessantes para dizer que a justiça criminal e a cultura da paz podem ter algumas possibilidades de reconciliação. No meio que num sentido que nós vamos entender o propósito do direito penal. Então, se a gente pensar nesse sentido do direito penal como um meio de denúncia social do que aconteceu, né, também de reparar ou melhorar a situação, resolver problema. E, finalmente, uma questão que parece autoevidente é que a proteção da sociedade é um propósito do direito penal. Mas nós também temos algumas funções preventivas e reabilitativas importantes. E aqui nós podemos ver como modelos de justiça restaurativa e de uma cultura da paz podem colaborar para a realização desses propósitos, inclusive no que tange os aspectos preventivos e reabilitativos do sistema de justiça. Inclusive ver a participação como uma virtude cívica que tem valor por si mesma. Então, esse valor é muito importante, na medida que os cidadãos vão poder participar dentro da prestação de justiça e na resposta a questões que são de interesse social. Então, a participação democrática como um valor cívico é bastante importante aqui para nós. Então, isso não refere-se apenas ao caráter instrumental do sistema de justiça criminal, mas também sobre como ele pode ter um valor de participação. Mas tem alguns assuntos interessantes aqui, alguns desafios. Então, vamos tentar pensar um pouco aqui para trás, pensar um pouco sobre o que a gente aprende com essas pesquisas envolvendo. Então, nós temos bastante boas pesquisas sobre justiça restaurativa que dá suporte para algumas dessas conclusões que eu vou listar aqui. Mas muito mais pode ser dito e nuançado sobre essas questões. Então, a primeira coisa que a gente descobre é que vítimas, ofensores e membros da comunidade geralmente querem participar em práticas de justiça restaurativa. E eu menciono isso porque muitas pessoas pensam que vítimas, ofensores e membros da comunidade nunca vão querer participar, porque elas têm uma percepção mais voltada para questões punitivas. Isso talvez seja verdade, mas eu tenho visto na minha pesquisa pelo globo que, na realidade, há uma proclividade para participar desse tipo de experiência. Nos Estados Unidos, em várias partes do mundo. Então, não se verifica uma falta de vontade de participação. Um segundo elemento é que, geralmente, a experiência das partes que participam de práticas restaurativas tem uma experiência mais satisfatória com relação à sua experiência do sistema criminal. Então, tanto para vítimas quanto para ofensores. Também há algumas questões interessantes com relação a dinheiro, em termos de tempo, custos financeiros, o custo de tratamento para vítimas e as suas famílias. E também nós vemos alguns resultados positivos em termos de satisfação de forma geral, diminuição de reincidência, o aumento do cumprimento com medidas de restituição e da redução do medo entre as vítimas. Então, esses são alguns elementos positivos de justiça restaurativa que podem ser abordados de uma forma boa. Então, para a gente atingir esses resultados positivos, as práticas devem ter um alto nível, e vários esforços são necessários por parte dos praticadores, né, por parte de quem implementa essas medidas. E eles incluem estabelecer um ambiente que é seguro, neutro e confidencial. Então, nós devemos nos perguntar a pergunta: se a gente tem um programa de justiça restaurativa no nosso bairro, nós somos capazes de dar, né, de suprir essas condições para trazer as pessoas para a mesa para conversar. Vai ser um ambiente seguro, vai ser neutro, vai ser um ambiente suficientemente confidencial. No caso, o que as pessoas vão ter a possibilidade de conversar? Então, nós devemos também ter a gente tem que treinar e qualificar as pessoas que participam dessas medidas. Elas têm que ser bem treinadas. A gente tem que ter um grupo capaz de fazer a formação adequada dessas partes. E nós devemos ter uma capacidade de ter confiança sobre como essas pessoas estão treinando e dando suporte para a gente. Nós também devemos dar informações claras e honestas sobre como funciona a prática, para que as partes possam realmente consentir de forma informada ao que está sendo conduzido. Então, a gente tem que também falar, no caso de vítimas adolescentes, juvenis, com as famílias deles, também informar para as famílias o que vai ser conduzido e como vai ser conduzido. Nós devemos dar as informações corretas e abertas sobre o que vai ser conduzido, quais são os benefícios, de forma que eles possam tomar uma decisão de forma realmente autônoma sobre a participação deles nesses processos de justiça restaurativa. Então, nós sabemos que medidas de justiça restaurativa não podem ser impostas para as pessoas, certo? Então, os benefícios que a gente pode ver para a vítima e para os ofensores foram colocados, mas a gente também pode pensar em benefícios para a sociedade como um todo, né, no nível societário. Então, a gente pode ver que eles podem trabalhar numa tensão contrária à polarização, na promoção da paz social de uma forma efetiva e sustentável. Então, a gente consegue... Por exemplo, se a gente olha para um país como os Estados Unidos, a gente consegue ver quais são os efeitos da polarização no país, mas tentar brigar com essa polarização não é fácil, mas, no entanto, a gente consegue alguns meios para essa briga através de uma perspectiva de uma cultura da paz. Então, é beneficiário para a sociedade olhar para essas questões de polarização, por exemplo, desde uma perspectiva de uma cultura da paz. E isso envolve também uma educação social. Quer dizer, a justiça restaurativa torna possível um processo de aprendizado moral que é efetivo na medida que combina processos afetivos, cognitivos e performativos. E é precisamente fazendo a combinação desses elementos que a gente consegue ter um foco na autonomia da pessoa em fazer esses processos individualmente, que então desenvolvem a oportunidade para aprendizado moral. E isso não é aprendido apenas por livros ou numa relação professor-aluno, mas sim na prática desses processos no cotidiano. E de uma forma que é informada emotivamente, cognitivamente e performativamente. Assim, é importante participar efetivamente no sistema de justiça. A justiça restaurativa ela é capaz de prover as pessoas com formas de criar capital social, unindo pessoas e criando pontes entre diferentes grupos sociais. Mas aqui tem um mas importante. Nós temos realmente uma vontade política e uma coragem política para tentar implementar esse tipo de medida, ou nós vamos ser confrontados com uma resposta desde um nível de um populismo penal. E eu sei muito bem que países como o Brasil há um alto nível e uma alta aderência ao populismo penal. Então, nosso próximo slide. Então, vamos falar dos benefícios que as práticas podem ter para o sistema de justiça. Então, a primeira coisa que a gente pode dizer é que a justiça tem muitos quartos. Então, existem muitos tipos de justiça, muitos mecanismos de justiça. A justiça não é apenas algo que pode ser estabelecido desde um ponto de vista. Existem muitos elementos de benefícios econômicos e práticos aqui para o sistema de justiça. Então, a gente pode ter um sistema mais rápido, mais visível e mais eficiente, com uma reação mais eficiente, visível e rápida ao crime. E esses são pontos muito importantes, pragmáticos, para promotores públicos, por exemplo, ativistas dentro do sistema de justiça, para instigar as pessoas a participarem dentro dessas práticas. Mas é importante também dizer que essas motivações instrumentais não devem sobrepor as outras motivações mais essenciais ligadas ao sistema. Mas, mais uma vez, o sistema pode ajudar a reconstruir a confiança e a relação com a sociedade. E aqui ele vai estar conectado, por exemplo, com o mundo da vida das pessoas. E nós estamos em países europeus num problema de confiança, onde as pessoas não têm confiança no sistema penal, criminal. Então, aqui o sistema pode contribuir para um aumento nessa confiança. As pessoas participam, então, desse sistema. Ao participar nesse sistema de justiça restaurativa, elas têm um sentimento melhor sobre como o sistema de justiça restaurativa funciona. E pode, inclusive, ajudar na formação de maior confiança no sistema penal e da sua conexão com a sociedade. E aqui a gente entra numa teoria da justiça relacional. E nós temos bastante menção a isso dentro da literatura internacional sobre justiça restaurativa. E aqui, a cultura dentro dos sistemas de justiça juvenil, por exemplo, ele é vinculado com vários níveis de práticas. E a cultura profissional ligada a essas práticas dentro do sistema de justiça, ela acaba não sendo muito a favor da implementação desses sistemas. Então, se a gente quer ser bem-sucedido nos nossos programas de justiça restaurativa, a gente vai ter que focar muito na educação e na informação de promotores públicos, juízes, pessoas que trabalham no nível do serviço social, assistentes sociais, e no treinamento desses indivíduos para a participação nessas práticas. Então, agora no próximo slide. Então, nós precisamos pensar também nos desafios que nós temos para a justiça restaurativa. A prática ela é promissora, mas a gente ainda não tem uma implementação ampla dentro de programas maiores. Mesmo na Bélgica, nós não temos uma implementação dela num escopo maior. Então, nós não temos ainda uma capacidade de responder ao escopo mais geral, né? É uma fatia pequena do sistema de justiça que nós somos capazes de ocupar. Um outro elemento importante é que alguns programas, e isso já foi mencionado pela professora Schutt, é que alguns dos sistemas de orientação para a vítima, elas são fracas. Então, nós vamos ver como as formas... Desculpem, gente. Então, nós vemos que tem alguns dos critérios que permitem as pessoas a participarem dentro desses sistemas de justiça restaurativa, são critérios que estão relacionados ao ofensor. E que estão vinculados à seriedade do crime, à história do ofensor, e também ao tipo de crime que ele cometeu. Então, por exemplo, a gente vê o foco de programas para réus de causas ou crimes vinculados a jovens, juvenis. Mas isso é um problema importante, é um problema fundamental, porque acaba excluindo muitas vítimas desses tipos de crimes e exclui, às vezes, vítimas, por exemplo, cujo ofensor é adulto ou que são vítimas de crimes mais sérios. E é difícil defender a ideia de justiça restaurativa quando você está excluindo grupos grandes de vítimas do processo de implementação de práticas. E outro aspecto importante é em que medida as vítimas, perdão, as famílias das vítimas, as vítimas estão envolvidas e são empoderadas dentro do processo. Um outro problema, em que medida e como a comunidade pode ser envolvida e ser tornada responsável pela medida. E como nós podemos lidar com desigualdades sociais e injustiças sociais dentro do sistema de justiça restaurativa. Próximo slide, por favor. Então, a gente também tem que ver que nós precisamos de um ambiente mais amplo envolvendo política social. E é necessário, então, a gente focar em políticas públicas. certo? Que envolve políticas públicas, e elas devem ser desenvolvidas do nível central para o nível local, envolvendo inclusive organizações não governamentais. E claro que os departamentos de justiça devem ser envolvidos, mas também o sistema de assistência social, de saúde, assistência juvenil e outras autoridades e agências que podem ter competência dentro do sistema. Então, isso é central para a gente poder fazer uma implementação efetiva do sistema no nosso país. E aqui a gente pode pensar também as responsabilidades. As responsabilidades aqui do sistema de justiça restaurativa. E há uma importante responsabilidade com relação à vítima. Então, primeiro, nós não podemos estabelecer uma relação fraca com relação à vítima, como alguns programas colocam. A justiça restaurativa tem que ser uma abordagem balançada. Balançada não, desculpa, gente. Equilibrada. Balançada foi horrível, desculpa. Então, uma abordagem equilibrada. Nós precisamos envolver a vítima em grande medida dentro do sistema. Então, nós precisamos trabalhar também como nós estamos envolvendo os programas de assistência e o sistema de programa de assistência juvenil. Como é que nós vamos trazer as vítimas juvenis, por exemplo? E, no entanto, trazer essas vítimas para dentro do sistema é parte do que nós precisamos fazer. Mas como a gente consegue fazer isso? É um desafio grande. E muitas vezes, ao focar nas necessidades do ofensor, nós acabamos esquecendo de algumas das necessidades das vítimas dentro desses crimes. E muitas vezes, na implementação do programa, a necessidade dessa inclusão não é autoevidente. Muitas vezes a vítima, por exemplo, pode não estar participando, pode estar interessada em participar, ou a gente não consegue trazer a vítima. Nesse sentido, como é que a gente pode trazer as necessidades dessa vítima sem envolver ela diretamente, por exemplo? E aqui nós precisamos de uma espécie de filosofia de implementação dessas práticas dentro do trabalho do serviço social, dos assistentes sociais, e da cooperação com programas de serviço social vinculados às vítimas para fazer essa intermediação. E daí vem a necessidade da cooperação com essas medidas. Medidas não, programas. Esses programas, no entanto, não existem em todos os locais. Então, por exemplo, a gente teria que ver, no caso do Brasil, em que medida nós temos estão vinculados a programas de apoio à vítima. Então, nós deveremos procurar como lidar com essas práticas em todos esses níveis, levando em consideração as necessidades das vítimas aqui de forma tão completa quanto possível. Então, responsabilidades aqui do lado do ofensor para a vítima. E aqui alguma... E aqui, será que nós não estamos esperando demais do sistema e de lidar com, especialmente quando a gente trabalha com juvenis, por exemplo, será que não é pedir demais de um adolescente que ele consiga encarar a vítima da sua conduta? Então, um artigo recente desse autor da William Wood, da Griffith University, que se chama Indecent Demands, as demandas indecentes do sistema, e ele gostaria, o professor Ivo vai agora dividir algumas ideias aqui. E o artigo, ele se ocupa com o conceito de responsabilidade. Mas a questão é, isso é central para nós na história restaurativa, para a justiça restaurativa. Mas a palavra accountability, né, responsabilização, ela é muito flexível. Ela é quase como uma ameba, né? Ela é muito plástica. Nós podemos entender a responsabilidade de várias formas diferentes. Então, nós temos que ver como a definição de responsabilidade também está envolvida com as nossas expectativas com relação ao que vai ser atingido, né, ao que vai ser realizado nas práticas. Então, a gente vai querer que as pessoas façam o quê? Engajem no diálogo, elas façam reparações, elas vão ouvir as vítimas. Então, todas essas questões estão envolvidas na definição do que pode ser, na expectativa de jovens para admitir danos. Eu dividiria, o professor Ivo, em dois tipos de categorias. Uma que é uma responsabilização temporal e outra que é uma responsabilização com relação ao objeto. Então, uma da questão é você se considerar de forma retrospectiva responsável pelo que foi feito contra a vítima. E nós também podemos esperar que ele se coloque em perspectiva com o objetivo, que é como ele vai deixar de praticar aquela conduta no futuro. E cada programa vai ter uma solução diferente para cada uma dessas medidas. Então, coisas diferentes são esperadas por parte das partes que estão envolvidas nesse tipo de medida. Tanto com relação à reparação, tanto com relação à própria pessoa que está envolvida. Então, nós deveríamos deixar bastante claro com a forma que nós temos expectativas sobre responsabilidade quando a gente entra nessas práticas. Então, é importante que a gente tenha um entendimento claro sobre o que nós falamos quando a gente fala sobre responsabilidade. Então, a gente agora poderia ver o próximo slide, que eu não estou vendo também. Agora vamos recolocar os slides. Então, nós também podemos falar, por exemplo, com relação à questão do trauma. Por quê? Porque a responsabilidade está vinculada à questão do trauma. Por quê? Porque jovens, muitas vezes, têm uma experiência muito alta de exposição a trauma e situações adversas na infância, especialmente por parte de ofensores, na comparação com não ofensores. E a gente consegue prever ou indicar que há uma alta proclividade de traumas sérios, que incluem abuso parental, negligência, vitimização por violência, ofensas sexuais, ser exposto à violência, perda de pais ou de cuidadores.
Então, os jovens que cometem crimes como forma de reagir contra a traumatização que eles foram vitimados quando mais jovens ainda, quando criança. Então, nesse caso, muitas vezes, apelar para a responsabilidade pode ser uma reação inefetiva para dar conta das causas do comportamento ofensor, do comportamento de dano. E ele não, e muitas vezes não vai se encaixar com as percepções que adolescentes têm sobre justiça e respeito, e não se relaciona, por exemplo, com um certo cinismo com relação à bondade ou à justiça. Porque a gente vai ver que essas pessoas têm uma forma muito clara de perceber a bem social quando elas foram vítimas de traumas quando mais jovens. Então a gente deve se colocar no lugar dessas pessoas e tentar evitar uma noção muito normativa de responsabilidade. Nós precisamos nuançar as nossas expectativas com relação ao conceito de responsabilidade. Basicamente, que tipo de moralidade nós vamos ter em mente quando a gente está lidando com essas pessoas? Qual é a capacidade que essa pessoa tem de considerar algumas questões morais por causa do contexto de traumatização dela? Então, se a gente olha no nível social, então, nós estamos vendo uma criminalização social muito frequentemente para juvenis, para adolescentes, aqui no nível macro. Então, o trauma individual não pode ser isolado de padrões no nível social. Inequalidades sociais, sociais, econômicas, de classe, raça, étnicas, e vinculadas a questões de indignidades gerais, são também vinculadas com questões de gênero. Então, todos esses participam dos processos de restauração. A gente precisa também considerar as exclusões sistêmicas do contexto social e econômico vinculadas ao capital. E todos nós sabemos que há uma representação desproporcional de pessoas de cor e menores e de minorias dentro do sistema de criminal juvenil. E aqui a gente tem que ver qual é a ligação da representação, dessa super-representação dentro do sistema de justiça restaurativa também. E também é importante pensar qual é o nosso nível de dependência do sistema criminal juvenil para conseguir trabalhar com esses adolescentes. Por quê? Porque a gente pode replicar algumas tendências do sistema criminal dentro das nossas práticas. Então, eu gostaria também de trabalhar com esse artigo do meu compatriota, Petronella Bunen, onde ela reflete sobre violências estruturais no Brasil, na relação com justiça restaurativa. Então, a justiça restaurativa não deve sozinha pensar dar conta de problemas de países com uma alta taxa de encarceramento. Então, nós devemos adotar, dentro de uma metodologia de justiça restaurativa, um tipo de mecanismo que possa tornar possível informar as pessoas sobre problemas que estão em andamento. Então, essa é uma parte importante aqui. Então, vamos de volta para o artigo aqui, que a gente começou, onde a gente tem um desacoplamento da questão da responsabilidade, accountability e responsibility. Isso é muito difícil de traduzir, tá, gente? Accountability e responsibility como dois termos diferentes. Eu precisaria pensar como traduzir isso, agora eu não vou conseguir. Mas chegar à responsabilização, tá, não é autoevidente para muitas pessoas jovens. Há um problema em... E ele sugere o termo dar conta. Então, accountability como dar conta. Tá? Dar conta de algo. Publicamente, você dar conta de um problema. Então, você tem que dar conta do problema que você causou. Enquanto responsabilidade vai ser colocado no sentido de ser obrigado a fazer uma coisa certa. Eu não vou conseguir dar conta de todos esses elementos, mas se vocês puderem passar os olhos sobre essa distinção entre accountability e responsibility, sobre dar conta e ser responsável, seria meu ensaio agora, tá? Então, o que a gente teria que pensar é na tomada de responsabilidade dentro de um background de dar conta do problema. Você se torna responsável pelo dano, mas na medida que você assume a causa do dano que você provocou. Mas isso também é predicado no envolvimento de todos os atores sociais que estão colocados aqui. Então, nós deveremos ter a capacidade de dar um apoio para esses ofensores também, para eles conseguirem dar conta do problema através do uso de outros atores sociais. Particularmente a comunidade e a sociedade. Então, nós estamos dentro da comunidade como um nível importante aqui de envolvimento para essa responsabilização. Então, há uma importante responsabilização da comunidade. Mas que tipo de comunidade nós estamos falando aqui? Né? Porque muitas vezes a gente pode aceitar uma conceptualização muito reduzida do que é a comunidade. Então a gente não pode reduzir a comunidade apenas para a comunidade de cuidado do juvenil. Mas também não podemos reduzir para a instituição aonde esse jovem está colocado. Por exemplo, a prisão. Nós não podemos reduzir a nenhum desses dois níveis. Porque esse é um entendimento muito raso do que é a comunidade. Nós precisamos envolver a comunidade de forma ampla. A comunidade ou a sociedade, ou o Estado mesmo, são acionistas, têm as suas próprias necessidades e interesses, e o envolvimento destes não pode ser dependente das preferências do vítima, do ofensor ou do facilitador. Então, a gente tem que aqui pensar quem é que são as partes que nós vamos precisar envolver para facilitar o nosso diálogo. Então, esse tipo de envolvimento e esse tipo de vínculo na comunidade, ele realmente é determinante. Nós podemos imaginar formas como incluir isso. Nós podemos pensar formas muito passivas ou muito ativas de fazer esse envolvimento. Então, como nós podemos fazer isso? Isso é um desafio bastante grande. E ele está envolvido em como a gente pode envolver a comunidade de cuidado das famílias e dos ofensores, de forma a alcançar uma comunidade mais ampla. E aqui a gente alcança a necessidade para uma estrutura intermediária que realmente possa ser representativa da comunidade. Alguns países têm envolvido sistemas e que podem identificar dentro dos círculos restaurativos de forma ampla. Então, esses comitês vinculados a uma cultura da paz, né, de reconciliação, são bastante importantes para a gente como uma forma de tentar estabelecer uma conexão maior com a comunidade ampla. Que está vinculada a esses autores que podem dar conta de fatores mais estruturais vinculados ao crime e de como dar conta, por exemplo, dessas inequalidades estruturais e injustiças estruturais, que também trazem a necessidade para mecanismos para lidar com esses problemas. E que identificam problemas que voltam de formas constantes e que também envolvem as partes responsáveis dentro dos sistemas de justiça restaurativa e que vão estar envolvidas com o governo e outras medidas. Então, isso não é apenas sobre a manutenção da paz, mas sobre a construção de uma situação de paz social dentro do conflito. Bom, na teoria, essa é uma forma de envolver a comunidade de forma mais ampla. Mas não é só teoria, existem alguns exemplos, bastante trabalho tem sido feito nessa linha. Mas cada país deve achar a sua própria forma de lidar com essas questões. E agora algumas palavras sobre experiência belga. Nós temos alguns modelos com juvenis, com a mediação vítima-ofensor, com alguns conferenciamentos, algumas audiências. Nós temos mediação penal e mediação restaurativa. Mediação penal, ela é para ofensas para ofensas menos sérias, e também ela faz um processo de recondicionamento da ação. Em qualquer caso, nós temos um acordo para as partes sobre não ter um modelo. A mediação restaurativa é para todos os tipos de ofensas, em qualquer nível de seriedade, em todos os estágios do processo de justiça. Então, mais uma vez, insistindo que todos os tipos de ofensa podem ser objeto de mediação restaurativa dentro do sistema. A gente começou na Bélgica essas medidas há 20, 30 anos atrás. O país é federalizado. Nós temos a comunidade flamenca, a comunidade que fala holandês, a comunidade que fala alemão. E cada uma delas tem as suas próprias responsabilidades e às vezes o próprio sistema. Então, isso não é uma competência apenas do sistema federal, mas dentro de cada uma das comunidades específicas dentro do sistema belga que é dividido. Então, por exemplo, a comunidade flamenga tem o seu próprio decreto para a base de uso de justiça restaurativa. Algumas das características. É uma implementação ampla desde 2000 em cada distrito judicial. Ela é administrada pela assistência juvenil em vários casos. Então, é o governo que vai dar o financiamento para essas práticas. E eu realmente acredito que esse tipo de prática deve ter financiamento público por alguma autoridade federal ou estadual, mas uma unidade pública. Também quando envolve particularmente jovens, o nosso sistema tem um fundo pedagógico muito forte, baseado numa visão do sistema restaurativo como um todo. Se você olhar para esse decreto de 2019, você vai ver também uma constelação composta por reparação, sanção, cuidado e segurança dentro da implementação do programa. Então, o programa tenta prestar atenção em cada uma desses aspectos. O juiz juvenil, por exemplo, deve tentar primeiro práticas restaurativas e tentar todas essas possibilidades dentro do sistema. Mas ele também pode combinar a mediação restaurativa com outras medidas, inclusive o processo penal, criminal convencional. Então, há uma extensão de diferentes tipos de medidas positivas também, para que você possa trabalhar em conjunto com as medidas restaurativas. Mas se a gente segue uma abordagem de necessidades, a gente vai ver uma série de complexidades vinculadas às audiências, especialmente para vítimas juvenis. Porque qualquer círculo restaurativo é praticado numa situação de cooperação, que nem sempre é possível. Então, a gente precisa ter uma abordagem ampla aqui para conceber essas dificuldades. Então, nós acabamos não usando tanto conferências ou audiências aqui. Há uma resistência para a aplicação de conferências, porque muitos desses referenciamentos envolvem um juiz que não tem os juízes não têm mais tanto... Não, o que nós verificamos é que os juízes não têm tanta proclividade a aplicar conferenciamentos por medo das consequências do conferenciamento com atores juvenis. E geralmente nós vemos, em termos de compensação, uma compensação entre mediação e serviços comunitários. Porque, via de regra, nós vamos ver que jovens, especialmente, não têm os meios financeiros para compensar financeiramente as vítimas. Mas daí a forma de compensação é através de um trabalho comunitário. Mas ele é pago por ele é recompensado por esse trabalho comunitário através de um fundo de compensação. E muitas vezes esse meio de responsabilização, ele faz sentido para a vítima na medida que a vítima se vê contemplada dentro da sociedade com o trabalho que essa pessoa está se fazendo. Finalmente, nosso último slide. E nós temos algumas abordagens com vítimas crianças. Então, nós temos centros de justiça familiar, onde nós trabalhamos com a família inteira como um objeto de reparação. E isso é importante na medida que muitas vezes esses crimes contra crianças, que envolvem crianças, essas atitudes que envolvem crianças, elas envolvem todo um bairro, né? Elas afetam uma comunidade de forma ampla. Então nós também a gente tenta envolver dentro desses centros de família judicial, de justiça familiar, toda a comunidade. E também nós temos alguns casos dentro da Bélgica de abuso institucional histórico. Então, por exemplo, com relação ao que foi feito dentro do escopo da Igreja Católica, existem centros de arbitragem para conduzir reuniões com a Igreja e também para decidir compensações financeiras sobre as experiências vinculadas a abuso sexual. Em alguns casos, décadas atrás. Nós também temos alguns outros casos para, por exemplo, pessoas que foram vítimas de abuso dentro de internatos ou mesmo situações mais drásticas dentro do sistema. E aqui a gente vai contar muito com o apoio de centros de serviço social para fazer o encaminhamento para serviços de reconhecimento e de mediação. Então, existem bastante possibilidades de abordagens restaurativas que tentam abordar as necessidades de vítimas crianças, e também algumas das coisas que a gente abordou nos outros slides também podem ser usadas nesses casos. Muito obrigado pela sua atenção, e se vocês têm qualquer perguntas, eu fico feliz de abordá-las na próxima sessão. Obrigado. Thank you, Professor Ivo. I'm not sure you're getting the point. Ivo, I'm not sure you're listening to me here. If you can make any sign. So we have questions for Daniel, and we have questions for you, Ivo. I think I'll be translating. No, I can, just a minute. So Viviane asked how can restorative justice can reach for penal populism precisely in this moment where we have such an intense antagonization of this in the context of Brazilian politics with criminal populism and so on. So this is a great question, and I think that the first thing that we need to, it's hard to break away from this culture of penal populism. And this is not, as Ivo said, a Brazilian prerogative. So this is getting more and more traction outside. It seems really important for me to stress criminal populism is also getting more space as populism in general gets more space. So criminal populism is not isolated from a larger context. So we must understand that at the same time that there is a polarization in society, in contemporary society, this also happens in the scope of criminal policy. So it's very hard to see to provide a recipe that can work in this context. In any case, what we must do is work with the idea that, first of all, restorative justice is not just a system that can be associated with the notion of impunity. And I think this is the first thing. People have the sometimes have the notion that restorative justice is impunity because they do not understand that people do not meet to resolve a conflict is a form of resoluting a problem, even if that does not get to the point where someone is arrested. It's not that simple for two people to meet, and it's very painful to go through this process. And yet, we've been educated to think that the only way to think through hard crimes is through prisons. We have this prison-centric mentality, and this prison-centric mentality is part of our constitution as individuals. So understanding this prison-centric is very difficult, and building an idea that not all cases will be solved through prison. And finally, we have this issues connected to etymology that Ivo can say a little bit more. Because not always the victim wants to have a revenge from this. So the deconstruction of this discourse that this is the only serious way to reach this. We need really to dialogue with people that don't agree with us. It's very easy for us to have a dialogue among ourselves. It's very easy for us to understand each other. So we need really to bring this to a larger audience. So we need to give people the opportunity to think differently about this. So Ivo, I'm sorry, Ivo, I'm getting a little bit tired. It's been 4 hours, so I'm really reaching my limit here. So when we're faced with this reality, how can we really improve our practices in restorative justice? This is a great question, but I'm not feeling very, I don't feel it's my place to talk about these issues, but everything that I'm talking about adults is also relevant. We have the habit of saying, oh, restorative has a better, but I think that my main problem is that I don't see any way of I see the main problem is that we cannot stop the application of restorative justice with, for example, juveniles. We need to enlarge this, but in our culture, we need to formalize the practices of restorative practices. We need a legislation, and I know there's a lot of resistance to this, and I understand that legislating can exclude some practices, but we need to deal with our judicial culture, which is legalist. So we cannot escape our reality, which in most cases seeks to avoid practices and models that do not have a legal provision. So it's clear that if we don't have a legal provision, we can work in our scopes, like in this vacuum, and we can implement projects in the legal vacuum, and even inform judicial processes through this. If we have serious institutions that are working on a non-governmental level, that's fine, and should be taken in consideration, sure. And when we're talking about adults, we actually have means in our criminal law acts that involve measures of restorative justice as measures that can affect, for example, sentencing. If we need order. So some of these possibilities, they have a great deal of potential, and I think that we need, if we are looking at ways of improving our practices, it goes through this means of regulation and resolution, whether on juvenile justice or regular justice. So Daniele is asking, how do you see restorative justice practices in prisons and in internment centers? This is also a great question. As far as I know, within prisons, we have offender-to-offender conflict mediation. And very rarely, and it doesn't have as a focus conflicts that originate the prison. So still, I don't see any problem in applying restorative practices in prisons, especially if we acknowledge how restorative practices can demand less participation of victims, for example, of the state. But some practices are more difficult to implement, like restorative justice circle, for example. It's harder because of the number of people within a prison would be harder to implement. But if we're looking at conflicts between offenders and agents of the system, right, that I think that would be possible. And maybe even as ways of introducing a meeting or a conference between the offender and the victim within the prison context, if there is a if parts volunteer to participate in this. Rafaela Palamola has done some consulting on that, and she'll publish some articles on restorative justice in the context of prisons in Brazil, and you can look at these articles future. And Silvania asks, how can we get this feeling of revenge out of society? Well, if I knew the answer, I would be in Bahamas right now, right? But the notion of revenge is connected to a punitive and violent response. But the idea of revenge is usually connected to this. And this is usually a natural feeling. I don't see a problem in being revengeful, but my problem is more how this is connected to the form of punishment, like life in prison or death, and the way in which our prisons are organized, which is degrading and unconstitutional. So what we should work with is the social construction of punitive revenge. And we need to build social contexts that will allow both parts to see themselves as persons, both the victim and the offender seeing themselves respectively as persons. So we see that the moment of encounter is a moment in which we can reach and this mediations allows us to think through ways to destigmatize each other in the meetings, in the restorative meetings. And this can be providential, can be important in creating a culture of peace. Not only of peace, but also a culture that does not value revenge in such a hardcore way. So maybe this is a path to think on issues of revenge. We can do this in a way that is less violent. There is also some important works on criminal justice system in Scandinavia that we'll see that in more homogeneous societies we have a larger possibility of social cohesion that goes above the notion of us and them. And because of the social cohesion, that allows me to see the person that is being accused and the person that is the victim as respective members of a fellow community. And this could have an interesting effect in our will to punish as a main characteristic of Brazilian policy. But this is not an easy question. This is a complicated question, and I don't have one answer for it. We have clues that we can work around in many ways. But I thank you for the questions. All the questions were great. And we're back to square one, because we're going to have to talk about inequalities that need to be approached in order for us to have a better understanding of how restorative justice can be applied. So it's really important to think these topics of racism and so on.